In the previous episode of How It Works, we told you about the ship parts, the way we model the complexity of a ship's design in our game, and exactly what an HP indicator is, and how armor-piercing shells inflict damage. Today, we're going to discuss over-penetrations and ship modules. If you still haven't watched the first episode, we highly recommend doing so.
Let's return to shelling our test Fuso with armor-piercing projectiles, and more specifically to that exciting moment when we destroyed its bow and, as a result, the entire hull, devastated its superstructure and casemate, and dealt 56,500 damage to the Japanese battleship. Fuso is left with a mere 600 hit points in its aft. If the battleship keeps its bow towards you, there's no way you can get to these points. You can only outmaneuver it and hit its citadel or aft.
However, for situations like this, in World of Warships, like in the real world, there are other ways to deal damage. There's fires, over-penetrations and flooding. The damage from them isn't inflicted to a specific ship part, but gets deducted directly from the HP indicator.
Therefore, even if a part of the ship and the entire hull are destroyed and usual penetrations don't bring any results, over-penetrations on the destroyed bow or superstructure will still inflict 1/10 of the shell damage no matter what. Accordingly, if an over-penetration goes through an intact bow, both its HP and the HP of the entire hull will not change, and the damage will be deducted directly from the HP indicator.
Thus, our test Fuso will lose its remaining 600 HP after 2 over-penetrations to its superstructure, and will sink. As a matter of fact, it's possible to destroy a ship with nothing but over-penetrations, and its parts won't lose a single hit point while you do it. The only drawback is that it will take you quite a long time.
As a result, we have a system which, on the one hand, has an in-game model reflecting the design complexity of a real warship and the different values of its parts and compartments, and, on the other hand, offers plenty of options for its destruction.
However, we need to tell you about another important peculiarity of a ship's design. A ship is more than its superstructure, ends, citadel and casemates. What about primary armament turrets, torpedo launchers, AA defense posts and secondary guns?
Those are modules, i.e. components of a ship responsible for certain game functions. By damaging, temporarily disabling or destroying them, you can impact an enemy ship's ability to fire and maneuver, thus obtaining a significant advantage in battle.
Here is the list of modules: primary armament guns, torpedo launchers, AA defense posts and secondary guns. They all define the firepower of a ship. The steering gear gives it the ability to maneuver. The engine room provides propulsion. And last but not least, the magazines. They're responsible for the possibility of ammunition detonation and instant destruction of your ship.
To make it possible for players to damage or destroy modules, each of them has its own HP pool, which doesn't have any influence on the ship's HP indicator. As we've already said, we did this to reproduce the design complexity of real ships in our game models more accurately. Even if a player's ship loses some of its modules, it can still continue to fight. If you see a penetration notification, but the enemy's HP remains the same, it means that you dealt damage to a module.
Let's return to our test Fuso once more and study the way its modules get damaged. The primary turrets have this much HP in order to allow ships to remain combat capable for as long as possible. For example, let's take an armor-piercing shell with 1,000 points of damage that accurately hits a primary turret of the Japanese battleship.
After it hits and penetrates, the calculation for critical damage chance occurs. If Fuso was unlucky, the shell not only deducts 1,000 points from the turret's HP pool, but also temporarily disables it. The guns of this turret won't be able to fire or rotate for 25 to 30 seconds if you don't repair it.
By the way, the disability time differs from module to module, but if the module runs out of HP, it will be considered destroyed until the end of the battle, and you won't be able to repair it. Keep in mind though, that all modules are divided into destructible and indestructible in our game. The engine room and steering gear are indestructible. The rest of the modules can be destroyed.
The steering gear and the engine can only be temporarily disabled. This is necessary for more convenient gameplay. I think you agree that it wouldn't be nice to become a sitting duck and float about in the middle of the map pointlessly just because your engine room was completely destroyed.
Of course, all modules have different HP reserves and values in battle, but one of them is quite special. It's the only one connected to the HP indicator of your ship. It's the magazine. This connection is direct, unilateral, and, in a sense, fatal.
Critical damage to it leads to the magazine's detonation and the ship immediately sinks.
To avoid situations where your undamaged ship goes back to port after a single hit, we introduced a restriction. If a ship has more than 75% of its HP, the detonation chance is not calculated at all.
But if it's below 75%, the chance of detonation directly depends on the amount of damage that this module sustained in one blow. The greater the damage, the higher the detonation chance.
Of course, there's an excellent remedy to this problem: the Juliet Charlie signal. It completely eliminates the chance of detonation.
So far, we've talked about shells hitting a ship without armor. In the next episode, we'll tell you about another important aspect that influences the damage mechanic: armor penetration.
If you found this video useful, hit the like button, leave your comments, share it with friends, and of course, subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. See you next time.